with Jon Impemba and James Grande.
What's going on, everybody? Jon Impemba here with James Grande. Welcome to the Fantasy Farm NBA DFS Playbook Show. We got 7 games here on a Monday. James has a playbook out for all of you Fantasy Alarm members. Go check out that right now as he broke down today's 7-game main slate, giving you his favorite core plays, his top, middle, and value tier plays, along with his player pool. Grande, sir, how are we doing today, man?
Doing pretty well. It's a very interesting slate. 3 games with double-digit spreads, 2 games really low totals, 3 teams on second legs of back-to-backs, and we've got news from those games already. So it's a very interesting slate. I don't think the news cycle is anywhere close to being done either. Not necessarily shutting the door on Orlando being done with their injury report. I'm not shutting the door. We don't know what 2 pieces of the Phoenix news came by, and we don't even know if they're going to be fully done yet. It's playing a second leg of a back-to-back after heavy minutes yesterday. We had the Boston news. Obviously, the Minnesota news is crucial to what we're going to do with the rest of our with the slate. So still a lot of news to go. Some news has come, but it's all in all a very, very interesting slate from top to bottom.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the injury report, obviously, they released injury reports throughout the day. Orlando, had already ruled out Markelle Fultz and Gary Harris. They hadn't listed Wendell Carter Jr. or any of their other recently injured players as questionable, but as we know, can certainly...
Well, they ruled Isaac, an hour after they ruled those guys out, they then put Isaac on the injury report.
Yeah, Isaac is almost perpetually on the injury report, right? Kristaps Porzingis ruled out. We're kind of upset about that one. We were hoping for maybe a little revenge narrative in a front court matchup that he would have feasted on. Obviously, notable name. We're also waiting on the LaMelo Ball news to come through. Anthony Edwards popped up on the injury report there as well.
LaMelo up to probable.
Yeah, love seeing that for him. Anthony Edwards popping up as a midday questionable there. We were hopeful maybe we'll see Cade. I know he was doubtful last night. Any updates on Cade Cunningham here?
No, still listed doubtful.
Yeah. So as the injury news breaks, obviously we'll have it throughout the show. And as we mentioned, this starts at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Your late night hammer tonight, 9 p.m. Chicago and Phoenix there. Game totals and spreads, as you alluded to earlier, a couple of games here with double-digit totals. Philadelphia is a 14-point home favorite. That one is a 236.5 game total against San Antonio. We got a Wemby versus Embiid matchup there. We have Milwaukee, Detroit getting 12.5 points at home. That's got a 247.5 game total. We just recently saw that one go well over the total. Cleveland, Orlando, the low total is you're preferring to 216 game total there. Orlando getting 2.5. Memphis, Orlando, 225.5 total there. Toronto, a 7-point home favorite. Charlotte, Minnesota. Minnesota is giving 12.5 there. That opened at 15, but the Anthony Edwards news bringing that one down a little bit. 220.5 game total there. Boston, Dallas, 2.5-point home underdogs for Dallas, a 240 game total there. And then Chicago, Phoenix giving 5, 226.5 game total.
Yeah. Also to note in the Minnesota side, Mike Conley is not playing tonight. So
sure.
And we'll see that right away when we look at the ownership, because there's a lot of ownership going the Minnesota direction. And I'm not saying it's not warranted, but a lot of love on the Minnesota side. Not point guard, unfortunately. Edwards is, but NAW, Kyle Anderson not listed on the point guards, but they are getting all the ownership. Currently.
Yeah, exactly, right. And we've seen this before when Conley had been ruled out, where some of the ownership had gone, and then if you knock Anthony Edwards out there as well, obviously people like to gravitate. It is a pretty good matchup for going up against Charlotte too. So obviously some of the intrigue there as well. Guys, welcome into the show here. I know Albert already popping in. If you guys are new or haven't done so already, feel free to throw your questions in the chat. James and I happy to answer them for you. And if you haven't already liked and or subscribed to the Fantasy Alarm YouTube channel, I don't know what you're waiting for. We go live every day at 5 o'clock Eastern time. We do a morning show that we release overnight, getting you all ready for the day as well. Landon popping in. What's up, Landon? Happy to have you with us here today as well. We go position by position here, so let's break it down. Just taking a quick look at the top overall price plays. Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, and Giannis up over 10K. Those are your 3 top spends for the slate here, which brings us to point guard, where you have Luka at 11-2. Donovan Mitchell's $9,900. Devin Booker, 95. Dame Lillard, 92. Kyrie Irving at 9K. That's your 9K and above tier. Anything changed for you throughout the day here, James, as you've gone over the slate?
In terms of what? Like, I feel like there's just been a lot of news come through the wire. So
sure. You find yourself gravitating towards spending up a point guard tonight, given the matchups and the plays that we have here.
So like, I'm definitely intrigued by Luka. Like, it's obviously not a great matchup, but Luka's kind of just the select few people that you're just hoping to contain more than like stop. There's not much stopping Luka when he gets going. Even in a 17-point loss, he has a 30-point triple-double, and that's just kind of what Luka does, and nothing really Boston can do to stop him. I think his size gives just many people fits. Now they do have Holiday back after he sat yesterday, so he's good to go. That's probably the matchup we see. We'll definitely see Derek White on him as well.
Yeah.
He's also the lowest owned star. If you ever want to and by star I mean the guys over 10K. Their ownership and Embiid and Giannis, they're significantly higher, especially Embiid is 2x Luka. So if you want to get leverage, you definitely could play Luka. And then I really like Damian Lillard would be the other guy over 9K.
Sure.
He's not just because he's coming off 45. He scored 33 or more actual points in all 3 meetings against Detroit this year. That includes one game where they beat him by 30. And the other game, I think it was also a competitive game. He scored 34. So 47 plus
120, 118 here against Detroit. So
yeah, the 120. Yes. So both the 2 competitive games where he goes nuclear scoring. Obviously the last game was the best of the 3, but he has been a thorn in Detroit's side, and that, Detroit is not just bad. They are bad specifically defending guards. Jaden Ivey was benched earlier in the year for how bad he plays defense. Cade Cunningham, much better offensively than he is defensively. So I have a lot of interest in tournaments in Damian Lillard.
Yeah, the ownership is kind of interesting. Obviously, Joel Embiid, your highest rostered expensive play for the day. He's sitting almost 30% over on DraftKings, which, again, we're talking about a guy that's in a game that has a 14-point spread, getting that kind of love, knowing that he's probably only in for 3 quarters in this game yet. Could go 60 plus fantasy points in that range there. When we go down to the mid-tier here, LaMelo Ball at 89, we talked a lot about that. And we like that price point for him. And if now that Minnesota is going to potentially be without Edwards and obviously already without Conley, are you worried about any sort of limitations if Ball is in tonight? Or is that just a really much improved matchup now for him?
Yeah, for sure an improved matchup. I will say, NEW is a very good defender for, that's the matchup he's definitely going to see. Sometimes it doesn't matter because LaMelo Ball is one of those dudes. 28 plus actual points in 3 of the 4 games he's been back, and we saw a really good shooting outing from him last game. So it might not matter. The price is really good, and if Edwards sits, obviously that leads us to thinking, well, maybe this game can stay more competitive. I still think Charlotte's going to have a hard time scoring overall, just with how good Minnesota is defensively. They're not going to have a fun time with PJ Washington at the 5 as well. So I'm good with LaMelo in tournaments if you're trying to be different, but it's definitely not necessarily a priority for me. I would find a couple extra 100 to get to Lillard, or I would just live in that 6 to 7K tier that I think there's a lot of intriguing options.
Sure. Moving our way down. You mentioned the 6 to 7K tier. Who's the top picks in that room?
I love Kobe White tonight over a fantasy point per minute this year without Zach LaVine, and over a fantasy point per minute on the year with sharing the floor with DeRozan and Vooch with LaVine off, which I think is a critical part of this equation. Vooch does lead the team, but he has the toughest matchup of the 3. I think Kobe White is a kind of a matchup problem for Phoenix, just given they use Bradley Beal and Devin Booker in the backcourt. Neither guy I mean, Beal's probably too big and slow. No offense to him to guard Kobe White. Like we know how fast
Beal
Kobe
good
White is.
steals guy, but that's really been about it for him.
Yeah, and Booker has been weirdly foul happy all like the entire year. So I think Kobe White presents a really big issue for Phoenix. We just saw the question or Landon pop up with Kate Cunningham. Yeah, I mean Jaden Ivey made the playbook right up today. He's been really, really consistent. 36 plus fantasy points in 6 straight games without Cade Cunningham and Marvin Bagley. I took Bagley off the floor in this instance since he's traded. 1.17 fantasy points per minute, 28% usage, nearly a 29% usage, 5% usage bump. And we know the one issue or the primary issue with the Milwaukee defense has been against guards. So Jaden Ivey, the Derek White thing, not a core play for me tonight, but definitely more intrigued by Derek White since Kristaps been ruled out. We know Derek White is a good usage bump guy. Anytime, basically any of those, the big 3 ruled out, 4.5% usage bump for Derek White leads the team, 24%, 1.14 fantasy points per minute. Still like distant third behind Brown and Tatum, but the price is obviously easier to get to on Derek White. So
I love the ups and downs that he's gone through lately. Obviously, he had that crazy run here where he built his price tag all the way up to that near 8K range. Slumps down a little bit. Then we get 3 straight games of 18, 18, and 19 shot attempts. It's like it shows what he's certainly capable of as a tournament play. While he's under 7K, again, you mentioned he's in your player pool tonight. I agree. I think he's worthy of a player pool consideration if you're building 20 lineups tonight. Maybe he's in 20% of those, couple lineups here tonight just for what he's shown, because he gives you 43, 44, 67, certainly paying it off. Our guy Toronto Dave here talked up Scotty Barnes. We mentioned obviously a little bit. We do like Toronto here tonight against Memphis. If you had to pick between him or Quickly at the guard spot tonight, you got a favorite of the two?
I mean, I like the spot for Quickly. I like Barnes better because there's multi-position eligible. He's still their best player. He still has the higher ceiling. He made my write up today and Quickly didn't. So sure. I'd lean Scotty Barnes in this spot.
How do you handle any of these San Antonio plays? Vassell, Trey Jones always coming off of a huge game. Anybody in that range for you?
I'm acting like they don't exist.
They don't exist tonight. That's fine. I could see that.
Wemby, there is interesting note. Wemby is up to a 27-minute restriction.
Okay, which makes sense. Last 3 games, 27, 27, 28 minutes, I think it was for him. Yeah. So good on spot for him there. Value tier at the point guard position. Anybody now that Fultz is ruled out? Do you have any interest in the other guards for Orlando?
I mean, I like the price for Jalen Suggs. I don't love the minutes.
Yeah.
It's
Anthony at 47 was more of like a interesting, like side eye almost, right? Like
I'm not necessarily all too interested in Orlando. Like, not to say that they can't have a good game, but I don't know what like the backcourt's minutes are going to be distributed, especially with Franz being back.
Sure.
And I know that they're down a couple guys, but like they've been down a couple guys before, and Jalen Suggs doesn't surpass 20 minutes. They've been down a couple guys before, and Cole Anthony like barely sniffs like mid 20s minutes. Like I get the price is super appealing, and he's a really high usage player. But with Franz back, and I don't know if you saw, they took out Goga Batadze out of the rotation yesterday and used our boy Mo Wagner.
Yeah.
Like that's another second unit high usage guy that he's dealing with. So it's just like Cleveland's been the best team in the NBA over the last 15 games. They're 12-3. They're number 1 defensively, and that's over that span. Lowest total on the board. Like if I lose to Orlando, really, I'm okay with that because it's just not a spot that I necessarily want to get to.
Fair enough. I think for me, when I was kind of building out some lineups, he just sort of fit a plug. I'm like, all right, I'm in tournaments. I'm doing GPPs here. He's been priced 6K, 5K range. Fultz comes back. You see his minutes slash. But, when Fultz was out of the lineup, he was playing kind of mid-20s. He has sort of that 20-plus fantasy point pop. So I didn't hate him at $4,700, given what like he was considered as a player before. Any other value guards for you?
Like at the same price, I'd rather probably play Ayo Dosunmu, who has just had a bigger role. At least when we know that when Zach LaVine is out, there's a kind of a bigger role for Ayo. So, now like we talk about usage rates. Obviously, Cole Anthony is a guy that's definitively going to shoot more than Io DeSumo. And Io DeSumo is not exactly like a high usage player, but he's definitely been better in that department. 4 straight games, double digit scoring. The peripheral stats have been good, and they're going to need him on the floor tonight with the Beal and Booker assignments on the other side of the floor. So I think we see a pretty tight rotation for the Bulls, 8, maybe 9 guys, and Io approaches 30 minutes. I just feel better about the minutes there than I do about Cole Anthony's.
Yep, totally fair. Just to your point, no Harris, no Fultz. Cole Anthony near 25% usage rate, 24.8, 0.92 fantasy points per minute. Obviously, Ben Caro, Franz Wagner carrying the water there, up over 1.15 and 1.21 fantasy points per minute for that Orlando crew. Shooting guard position, spending up. Do you have any interest in the top price guys here? With now that LaMelo Ball is expected to play, does Rozier take a downgrade for you? Where's your targets here?
I mean, it would be Anthony Edwards of the top tier. I think the price is still just misrepresenting Anthony Edwards overall. 1.25 fantasy points per minute without Mike Conley, 33.5% usage rate. Like, yeah, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to start, and he's going to be a value that you plug and play. But just look at the usage rates, even with Conley off the floor. Like, the ball is in Edwards' hands all the time. So as long as this game stays competitive, I have interest in Edwards. Now, we don't know if he's going to play. Late edition with an illness is not like the best news, but we've actually seen the last couple days. I forget who it was yesterday. Someone was late edition with an illness and played through it. So we'll see if he ends up playing. 8:00 game, so 4 games prior tip off. Not the best. Hopefully we get that news early. But for the top tier, like above 8K, even I guess including the 7K tier, it would be Rozier, or it would be Edwards for me.
Edwards, okay. Listen, I mean, if Edwards gets ruled out, Karl-Anthony Towns would be such an amazing. The price, the matchup, everything would be green lit for Towns here this evening. Moving our way down through the 7K range into 6K is RJ Barrett's here up to $6,900 price, a little bit on the rise for him. We mentioned Jaden Ivey and some of these other guards. Barrett's the only one we haven't talked about yet. So him and Middleton, I guess, in that range. Do you find interest here, or do you continue to work your way down into the 5K and below?
Yeah, I mean they're fine. I think both are good cash game plays. I have no like strong desire to like make them core options, but I think they're both fine if you land on one or the other.
Okay. Isaiah Stewart officially in tonight for the Detroit Pistons. So I know that was something we were looking at last night for their rotation there in the front court for Detroit, but just plugging that in there now. Brandon Miller, Max Strus, good to go there. Luke Kennard, Alec Burks, $5,400. Some plays that certainly has had some big performances of late down here.
Magic starting lineup. Anthony Black is your starting point guard tonight, which isn't surprising because that's kind of what they've deployed. Like nothing Cole Anthony can do to draw a start. Like they would start Trevelyan Queen over Cole Anthony if they could. Right. But Black, Suggs, Wagner, Boncaro, and Wendell Carter starting. So your starting 5 sans Markelle Fultz in the past. That shooting guard tier is fine. Miller, I was a little more bullish on last night. I'm a little less bullish on today.
Yeah.
I just don't love the matchup overall. I know he's done it. He had a really tough matchup against Philly last time out, and he was great. And he was really good against San Antonio with LaMelo. The usage rate's fine if you want to get to Brandon Miller. I was more bullish on him again, as I mentioned earlier. Kennard, safe if you want. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of upside there, even though he's been operating as like the de facto point guard. Alec Burks, tournaments forever. If you think that game can stay competitive and he can continue to do what he's doing, there's like a wide range of minute outcomes for Alec Burks because we've seen him like out of the rotation and we've seen him play 30.
Played really 4 minutes in one of them.
Like it's so like it's hard to imagine he wouldn't play mid 20s to 30, to low 30s
Yeah.
in a competitive setting, especially if he's playing this well. But
he did it here, right? I mean,
But he-
maybe this was more of a blood and they came
Yeah.
back, but I mean, yeah, I don't know how a guy just drops 33, 6, and 7. I don't know how you don't plug him into the rotation there for sure. You mentioned you didn't really care for the Cleveland Orlando matchups. Does that take you off someone like Merrill tonight?
I mean, I would say I'm more likely to play the Cleveland side of things than I would be Orlando outside of Wendell Carter. I think Wendell Carter aside,
Yeah.
I have a lot of interest in my interest would definitely grow depending on the Cleveland news. Like we have the Karis LeVert is obviously a pretty big deal with the wrist injury. He's missed the last couple games. If he misses again, I mean, Merrill's playing a big role. I mentioned it to you on the pod. I don't think 30 minutes with a healthy Max Strus is necessarily his actual playing time. I do think mid 20s, from the Milwaukee game, he played 22. I could see 25, 26 minutes ceiling for Sam Merrill. And if he's going to take 14 threes or double digit threes for a guy who is known for that 41% from three, then I have no problem getting to him. But that's very Karis LeVert dependent. So I could say the same thing about Max Strus. I think Max Strus is a great play at 5,600 if there's no Karis LeVert, because we know what Max Strus' ceiling could be. He also left that last game, and they just didn't need to put him back in because they were beating Atlanta by 1 billion. Even when Atlanta made a little run, they were just like, nah, we don't want to extend you. You've been banged up a lot this first half of the year. So I'd be okay getting to either of those Cleveland guys, but it's very dependent on the Karis LeVert.
Sure. Any other value plays down here for you?
Yeah, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 3,500. He's the chalkiest play of the slate. We saw him start for Mike Conley in that Boston game. And now, look, he's not necessarily the best fantasy point per minute player. He's not. 0.7 without Mike Conley. Doesn't go up all too much without Anthony Edwards. 0.83. But he played 40 minutes in that Boston start, aided by overtime, but 35 minutes in regulation. Almost 30 fantasy points. You get 30 fantasy points at 3,500 and he's 70% owned and you don't have him, you're dead. You're drawing dead. So I'm going to be eating the Nickeil Alexander-Walker chalk.
Who can forget?
Yeah. I mean, that was the most outlandish fantasy output game of all time.
I said on this show, what's he going to do? 10X on me? He did.
He literally, I think 12, he might have 12X. It might have been but I mean, I think the legitimate range of outcomes is more so the Boston game. If Edwards sits, I'm not going to sit here and say that what you said, because I don't want to put that into the air, but I do think it's just kind of a plug and play. Shooting guard, small forward, the eligibility is as good as it gets. And, we've seen him start in place of anytime there's a.
Yeah, he's their go-to plug guy for 1 through 3 here. So small forward position, again, a couple of these guys have that dual positional eligibility in it. Tatum, Barnes, we talked Barnes a little bit earlier. Obviously, you're never going to say no to Jason Tatum at under 10K. Jaylen Brown, 8,100, didn't have the greatest shooting game the last couple of times. Denver, tough matchup for Boston in that game. Only scored 100 total points there. Comes out with a triple-double out of nowhere against Houston, though. $8,100 Jaylen Brown. Any interest here?
I mean, the numbers are good. Essentially 30% usage rate, 1.18 fantasy points per minute. You can definitely get there. Shooting guard, small forward. No problem getting to anyone in Boston if you end up on anyone in Boston. It's pretty good matchup. Dallas has been, they've been better defensively. Still just around league average in the month of January. They're 13th in pace in January. Boston's 12th in pace. So pretty good pace environment overall.
Just looking at the matchups, obviously we generally look for competitive games that are high scoring, and they check the box, right? The 240 game total and the 2.5 point spread makes you think that we should be getting 35 minutes out of all the stars. It should hit the over in that range, so but it is also a team where one team is dominated by one guy or two guys, another team is 5. So difficult to figure out what's going on. What's up, Des? Happy to have you in the chat here today. We're just going through the slate. Some matches we like, some matches we're getting to. If you have any questions for us, Des, feel free to throw them in there, my guy. We're happy to help you out tonight. Mid-tier, do you have any interest on a back-to-back with, I know you mentioned didn't like Orlando, but like Franz Wagner at 7,600 is a good price tag for the numbers we were getting out of him prior to his injury.
I mean, when you look at things, he lost 3 minutes of blowout, so Wagner was gonna play 31 minutes or so, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty full. Like, he's obviously a guy who can play upper 30s and was playing upper 30s, so not particularly.
Averaging 37 fantasy points in 2 games against Cleveland this year, while shooting horrifically, 29% from the floor.
This is, I will say, like, whatever early season Cleveland was is not this version of Cleveland. Like, they've been Cleveland's again,
which is weird because they're without Garland and Evan Mobley.
Yeah, I think that this is. You saw what happened last year. They went double big in the playoffs. The Knicks exposed it. Jared Allen couldn't be on the floor.
Yeah,
and then it's like, well, now you want to trade. Now it's like trade Jared Allen because you don't need him. But like, you can also see how good they can be when you just like they have now spacing and shooting and like good defensive players like Dean Wade, 40% from 3, good defender. Niang coming off the bench shooting 40% from 3. Merrill getting I just smacked my mic. I was so excited about
so excited, yeah.
I mean, Karis LeVert has been nails from 3. I mean, it's just been a really good shooting team who also just doesn't get scored on. In January, the number 1 defensive rated team in basketball. So it's like, I'm not doubting that Franz Wagner or Paolo Banchero can have good games tonight. I just, at their elevated price tags, I just kind of don't have much exposure.
Sure. Other guys down in this mid-tier range, a few we've discussed. DeMar DeRozan is one we haven't. He's $7,400. Gets that Phoenix matchup, no Zach LaVine. Bogdan, Vince Williams. What's your thoughts on the low 7K, 6K range?
Yeah, I almost coverboyed DeRozan on the playbook today, but I didn't want my Bulls homerism to show too much.
I'll hide my Celtics patch then on my shirt here, so nobody knows.
I got my my Bulls Jazz 98 final shirt on.
There you go.
So
and your other favorite team, Utah's not on the slate. So
my other favorite team, Utah's not on the slate. So I like DeRozan. Like, DeRozan and Kobe White are 2 guys that I'm playing in a lot of lineups. I'm getting a lot of exposure to the Bulls, getting Phoenix on a back-to-back. Phoenix is potentially really shorthanded tonight. I mean, Eric Gordon and Grayson Allen both popped on the injury report.
Right.
They're without Bol, who had firmly been in their rotation as like little as it sounds. Like, and then you look at their rotation, they don't trust anybody. Like, they play like 7 guys. They play their starting 5, Eric Gordon, and then rotating center room, right, as a backup, like Chimezie Metu or Drew Eubanks. Like, they don't really play anyone else. If Eric Gordon and Grayson Allen were to sit, I mean, the Bulls could just attack them with so many different options. And DeRozan,
does like Jordan Goodwin get run? Like, what happens?
He would probably have to.
Right?
He would probably have to. I think Goodwin would be dusted off. Not that like that matters all too much, but it could.
That's the reason I took the over 8.5 first quarter points again for Devin Booker tonight. I was just like, you know what? Let's just ride it through. I know it's a pace down spot here, but he's playing 12 minutes. He's going up against Chicago here.
Yeah, and they're elite offense. So like pace down spot, yeah, but like what if Devin Booker and Durant and Beal just don't miss? Like, pace down what? Like, they'll have 40 first quarter points, and then you're like, oh, okay.
They dictate the pace,
Yeah. So I think DeRozan is a great play. I mean, 20 shots in back-to-back games, almost a double-double without LaVine in that Memphis game, despite shooting 7 for 20. Phoenix, middle of the road defensively in the month of January. Obviously, pace-up spot for the Bulls. Like, every game is a pace-up spot for Chicago. So I have a lot of interest in DeRozan and our lunch pail friend Vince Williams just clocking in 9 to 5. Maybe some overtime today. Maybe we get some overtime from Vince.
If that game was competitive, he plays 35 minutes. He probably gets the 30 fantasy points again,
Yep. And that's just kind of what it's been. Like, I do think he's had a few games of shooting over his like actual ability because he hasn't been a good shooter for like most of the year, and if not all of it, sub 40% shooter. So I'm interested in clocking in 9 to 5. Maybe we get 9 to 5:30 tonight. Vince Williams gives us like 40 fantasy points. Look, there is 40-minute upside with Vince Williams because they're just so depleted, right? Like if anyone's going to play 40 minutes, it's him and Jaren Jackson. Those are the two guys that like you're most likely to get the biggest minutes out of. And like you said, he plays 30 in a game, they lose by 30. So they're just going to ride Vince Williams into the sunset and hope they keep this game competitive.
0.96 fantasy points per minute for Vince Williams with Rose, Bain, Morant, that whole crew out. So
yeah, solid. It's a solid number, for sure.
Moving our way down the list here into that 5K and below range, a lot of guys we've discussed because they all have dual positional eligibility. Any core plays for you down here?
Nothing core play related. I guess the only other thing I'd mention is that
Kyle Anderson is all.
It would be Kyle. It would be Kyle Anderson. And like, it's just interesting. I think Anderson is obviously just like infinitely better if Edwards sits, and I'm not sure how much I'd be interested in Anderson if Edwards plays. But also we've seen like Shake Milton when Jordan McLaughlin came back, they X'd Milton out of the rotation. And then McLaughlin lately X'd out of the rotation, like just gone, right? So could they, in theory, use Anderson as like their backup ball handler?
Right.
They could, right? Because he's Ken. We've seen him like be a primary ball handler for like multiple teams in the past. San Antonio now. So I'm obviously way more comfortable if Edwards is ruled out to get to Kyle Anderson. The field doesn't seem to think so. I mean, when you look at the last 3 times he's played 20 minutes, he's given you at least 18 fantasy points. 2 of them have been 26 and 38, right? So very wide range of outcomes, but even 18 fantasy points at 3,700 gets it done, especially if he's chalk. Like that's going to be perfectly fine, and you can still take down a tournament with that. But there's just obviously some type of minutes ceiling that he can obtain when Edwards is in versus when he's out, right? Like I don't think you're going to see 30 minutes out of Kyle Anderson unless Anthony Edwards is out.
Yeah, you need multiple people out, right, for him to sort of gain those rotation minutes there for sure. Was McDaniels even active for one of those games either? Like I know he had missed some time, so could have even like closed out that rotation a bit more. Sure. Anybody else? Champagne? Anybody? Yeah, just
no. I'm not playing. I'm not going.
Georges Niang, 4,200.
Niang probably contingent on the Levert news for me. Okay. But it's a good price for a guy making every shot he takes right now.
Okay. You were in on Patrick Williams this morning.
We'll talk about him.
All right, let's get to power forward then here. Des, we're in on NAW. Obviously, we just kind of talked a little bit about it, but definitely currently the projected highest rostered player on the slate. So we're there with Mike Conley, and even more so if Anthony Edwards is out of the lineup. Power forward, you have Giannis at 11K, Tatum 97, Durant 91, your top 3 price plays. Did you find yourself spending up at power forward today, James?
I mean, it all depends on like your perception of the Milwaukee-Detroit game, because Giannis on cue available to play. Like if this game stays competitive, I mean, Giannis is playing every minute, like 37 plus minutes in every competitive game. It is very hard to imagine Giannis not getting 55 fantasy points in 37 minutes and like smashing that, right? Like if he's given us 60 in back-to-back games, 1 30-point triple-double, one assist shy of a 30-point triple-double. Detroit obviously getting Isaiah Stewart back like helps their interior defense, but does it matter when Giannis is going downhill? It doesn't. I would say like in games that I'm playing Giannis, I'm using like Jaden Ivey or something, because that you're playing Jaden Ivey with the assumption that you think it's competitive. Yeah. On the Better Sports Betting Show today, I actually gave out Detroit plus 12.5, and you and I had talked about it last night. Milwaukee's been terrible against the spread this year, 16-26. They're the 3rd worst team against the spread. They're also 1-9 against the spread their last 10 games overall, and they don't put teams away. They don't put bad teams away, which I think is a obvious flaw because they don't aren't good defensively, and that's been another flaw that they've had all year. So, if Detroit can keep this game competitive again, then yeah, I mean, I'd have a lot of interest in Giannis.
Sure.
So that's all like dependent on the person playing the lineup, their perception on, well, Detroit's the worst team in the NBA by a mile. Milwaukee is 29-13, second best record in the East. How does that game stay competitive? Well, we just saw it. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but
we gave the numbers this morning, right? So Milwaukee on the road this year, they're 8-11 against the spread, and they're 1-9 against the spread in their last 10 games. They're 10-9 overall this season on the road. So Milwaukee just a terrible road team this year. Now Detroit, obviously not a good basketball team, right? They're 4-38 overall. They're 2-19 at home. They are 9-12 against the spread, which I guess is surprising for a team that only has 4 wins. In their last 10 games, they're actually 6-4 against the spread, despite being 1-9 in those games. So Detroit playing a little bit better basketball. They are home where they're closer to 500 against the spread than they aren't, versus a Milwaukee team that is very bad on the road, very bad against the spread. Against the spread overall this year, Milwaukee just 16-25. So Detroit against the spread 19-23. So they're comparable spread numbers there as well. So Milwaukee, because of how bad their defense is, never really blowing anybody out, right? They're keeping a lot of teams in, and Detroit has some scorers on their team. Burks, Bojan. It's unfortunate Cade not available to kind of help carry that water for them. Any interest in Wembanyama?
Sure.
I mean, giving you 50 plus fantasy points pretty consistently, and now he's up to 27, 28 minutes. I mean,
yep. I mean, you just need the game to stay competitive to get to the 27, 20 minutes. That's sure. All. That's the only caveat, because I know Pop gave him it was 27 minutes in the Atlanta game and it was 30, but he was the reason that they came so close to coming back in that game. If this is the Charlotte one, but opposite end of the spectrum where it's 130 or 100 to 70 going into the fourth, you're not going to see Wemby again. So
sure.
You need him to, not just him, but you need the Spurs to make shots to keep it competitive for sure.
Mid-tier range guys, Banchero, Triple J, Towns, Bridges. Obviously we had a comment from our guy, Cracker, asking me what I thought of Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm in. We like him. I can go there. I'm fine with this matchup, especially.
Yeah, I cover Boyd him in the show and my playbook today. 190-minute sample. Sans Morant, Bain, Smart, Rose, Biyombo. 10% usage bump to 40.3%, 1.3 fantasy points per minute. He has a 30% usage rate or higher in 4 straight games. He had a 47% usage rate in that Minnesota game that he had 35 points in 18 minutes in. And this is a really nice pace spot for Memphis. So I am all in on Jaren Jackson Jr. And I don't really care who knows it. He was, where is the ownership? I saw Jaren Jackson coming in fairly rostered earlier.
Triple J was, let's see here, Jackson. Memphis. Let's see. Where's Memphis on this? 19%.
So I'm good getting to Jaren Jackson 19%. The front court matchup in general against Toronto is super appealing. Not that Jackson's a good rebounder, but this is a ceiling rebound opportunity for him too. So yeah. We don't know, obviously, have the Xavier Tillman status yet.
Okay, Tillman's getting some love tonight as well. He's actually currently the 5th highest price or highest rostered player on the slate. And obviously that dictates whether or not he's in or out. So
Right. So I'm all in on Jaren Jackson here in tournaments, and can't play him in cash because that's obviously a suicide mission when you consider all the foul trouble he gets himself in. But I really like Jackson tournaments. I like Towns too. You mentioned I prefer him if Edwards is out, but that's not a surprise. I think so would everybody else too.
Yeah. I mean, listen, 80.5 points, obviously a lot of points. But you do have Embiid, Tatum, Booker. I told everybody on the show on Friday to go under the Jokic Tatum point boost that they have on DraftKings. Tatum fell under that total, and he hasn't really been scoring the ball all that well. So you kind of need him to pick up the scoring. Certainly can do it tonight against against Dallas. I think Embiid probably gets his 30 plus per usual. I'm not really too concerned about his scoring effort. So if you think that he gets 30 and you get 25 out of Tatum and Booker, that he can go the over. I think it's a good line. I still am skeptical about Tatum when everybody's in, but there is no Porzingis. So that kind of boosts, I think, his scoring potential. So I probably lean the over on that one. And if you want to pair it up with something, I like the Wendell Carter rebounds tonight. It's at 7.5. Going the over on that one for me.
I saw Embiid's 35.5 point prop was the most bet today.
Yeah.
Most bet prop on the slate. So.
Yeah. I'm happy to do the over on that one. Again, I think that Embiid himself can probably get you close to half of those points. And then you just need one of Tatum or Booker to really have a high scoring game. And you're kind of walking your way in there. So happy to go the over. And again, I like the Wendell Carter rebound prop here tonight at 7.5. And he's played at least 25 minutes this year, James. He's gone over that prop in all 7 games. So assuming he doesn't get some weird back-to-back limitation, should be good there. Wemby PRA, I like the Wemby over 21.5 points, but you are worried obviously a little bit about the rest of that. If there's some, foul trouble with Joel Embiid or blowout potential, may not get all the minutes. Probably off the PRA, but if you want to go points, I still think he gets his points tonight. So, Embiid is not a stopper defensively. So, I think Wembanyama will get his points this evening.
I have a little disagreement. I think Joel's gonna.
I think he's a good defender, but Jokic obviously had no problem. We've seen guys have no problem scoring,
right.
And I think Wemby should be considered probably in that.
Well, that Jokic matchup was weird because they didn't guard each other for more than 5 seconds in that game. Aaron Gordon, and Tobias Harris were your Embiid and Jokic stoppers.
We'll see who guards Wembanyama tonight. Let's give you that.
That's a common. I mean, I think that's going to be a common thing because the way Philly plays defense and they have Embiid roam the paint. I wouldn't be surprised like Nicholas Batum or Tobias.
Yeah, Wemby stretches the floor, so they both stretch the floor. Both those guys there. Triple J, as I mentioned, Anon. I think Towns, if Anthony Edwards gets ruled out, is going to be I mean, we say this before. I'm like, how do people not play Anthony Towns? Like, and then the ownership comes in and he's still like 12%. Towns would be my first plug if I knew that Anthony Edwards was out tonight. I would go right to Towns at $7,700 and not look back. I might play him anyways at $7,700. And if Anthony Edwards is in, maybe we make a pivot or something like that. But I'd make some room to make sure I can get Towns in my lineup tonight, just in case.
Agreed.
Any guys under then? 6K, 5K range for you?
I mean, we'll wait and see what the news on Tillman is. If Aldama starts, he's going to be in play at 5K. Pat Will at $4,600. I like as a value. 24% usage in that last game against Memphis. That was the highest mark he's had since before Christmas. So take Zach LaVine off the floor. Patrick Williams suddenly, entering the equation as a higher usage player. So I like Pat Will. There is obviously room for more Memphis if Tillman is ruled out. Like Roddy played backup center, played 32 minutes last game against Chicago. You can get to him.
GG for your guy, GG?
Yeah, I'm a little.
Naz Reid here at 4,900?
And Naz Reid, yeah. I mean, he's going to play anyway. I wonder what they would give his minutes, like Sands, Edwards, and Conley. Unfortunately, the game against Boston where he played all those minutes and he went nuclear in terms of fantasy production, and he came off the bench in that game. There was no Towns, so they started Kyle Anderson, but there was no Towns. This is a sample where we haven't seen no Mike Conley, no Anthony Edwards this year, so I don't know what the minutes would necessarily be. He's played 24 and 26 in 2 competitive games the last 2, with Gobert and Towns smashing in both.
Yeah.
His best path to minutes is foul trouble.
Sure.
But there's still there's still, yeah.
Who's starting at center for Charlotte tonight? Because Nick Ridge is doubtful, obviously.
It's gonna be PJ. Probably they've been starting PJ, so I assume like they might look at it and be like, oh man, PJ struggled against Embiid. Like, yeah, like maybe they go Mensa starting at center and they use like a bigger, but then that like pushes Brandon Miller out. I assume it's PJ. Maybe they go Mensa. It's one of the two starting, but either way, it's bad business for.
And Nicholas here on the Trey Jones points and assists again. We're just worried about San Antonio staying in that game. So if they get blown out, Trey Jones might not get enough minutes to hit that prop. So I'm largely staying away from San Antonio props here tonight. Again, outside of maybe the Wemby points where I think he can go over, but obviously tougher spot. Center position here. JoJo, as we've talked a lot about, he is your highest rostered spend up on the slate tonight. He's $11,400. Very capable of giving you 60, 70 fantasy points in 3 quarters. We've seen it many a times this year. Don't need to speak too much to why Joel Embiid is a good play tonight.
Yeah. I mean, he's gone for 80 fantasy points in 3 quarters. Like it is what it is.
100% agree. Moving into this mid-tier range, we got Allen, Vucevic, Towns, as we discussed. Gobert at $7,400. Obviously, interesting. Where are you with the 7K centers?
They're fine. Jared Allen, 78, has been really good as a hub kind of player. Using him, he's been good kind of everywhere: passing, rebounding, defense. So 7,800 is a good price. Vooch has been pretty good. He's been the highest fantasy point per minute guy without Levine this year, but he has the toughest matchup of all the Bulls. Wouldn't surprise me if he goes for 50 because I said that. Every time I doubt Vooch, he goes for 50. So he's fine. Gobert has obviously been a monster lately. Had a ceiling rebound game, floor everything else last time out. 1 for 6 shooting. We've talked about this a little bit earlier in the year. He was really good scoring when Anthony Edwards was off the floor earlier this season.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily get a usage bump. Rudy Gobert is never going to be a guy that like, wow, look at all that usage going Rudy Gobert's way because he really can't create his own shot. But 1.09 fantasy points per minute, sans Edwards and Conley this year is really solid. 16% usage rate really speaks to who he is, but there's a ceiling there. I don't have a lot of love for the 7K range. I really like the few guys that are in the 5K tier.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, did you get to Al Horford at all tonight?
I like him better on FanDuel. He's 5,700 over there. And I think there's obvious block and steal upside for Horford more so on FanDuel. And then you look, it's also like a positional scarcity thing. Wendell Carter on FanDuel is like 6,600 and Tillman's 63. Horford's 57. So like saving money to go to Al Horford over there makes sense to me, where I think of it complete reverse order on DraftKings, where I want to get to Wendell Carter at 54. No shortage of tough matchups lately. Has not mattered in any capacity. Scoring the basketball, making threes, stretching the floor. He's a tough guard when he's he's a tough person to guard when he's going this well. 17 plus actual in 4 straight. 33 fantasy points in 3 straight. And then the Tillman thing. I mean, dude, Toronto's front court is just abysmal. Yeah. They like without Jakob Poeltl. I mean, even before the Poeltl injury, but since Poeltl's gone out, and Tillman's been really good. Last 4 games, he started 11, 6, 4, essentially 4 blocks and steals per game and 31 fantasy points while playing 33 minutes per game. And that speaks to like what they have at the center position. They cut Bismack Biyombo. Clark is out. Adams is out. They don't, obviously, if they wanted to use Jaren Jackson at center, they would have by now. He's just not a good rebounder. We saw what happened in Team USA when they went with Jaren Jackson at the center. That didn't work. So like, they limit him at center, and then they use like Aldama and they use David Roddy as a small ball center. But
they let Kenneth Lofton go. You think they would have
let Kenneth Lofton go? Well, if I think they probably would have if they knew they were going to have 43 injuries in like the next month following. But shout out Kenneth Lofton. Maybe he'll get a ring with Philly this year because he's
never know.
So like I think that there's a lot of intrigue for me. Tillman, Wendell Carter would be the 2 guys I'm looking at.
Tillman obviously just in a monster spot given the matchup there for sure. Carter's in a pretty good space for himself. You mentioned FanDuel, so I just wanted to like check on our rostership to see like where Horford and those guys sat. And instead, my jaw dropped to seeing John Concher at 40%.
Yeah, it's annoying. So like, I like debated all day on what to do with Concher. It's just a thing where FanDuel, there's not a lot of value.
Right.
Because on DraftKings, I mean, NAW and Kyle Anderson are both sub 4K.
And above him on the pecking order for sure.
Yeah, where like FanDuel, Kyle Anderson's $5,000. And NAW, I think, is like $4,500. So there's not like clear-cut value. And we mentioned it. Tillman on DraftKings is getting a lot of ownership. Wendell Carter, 5,400, is really reasonable. Neither of those guys are values on FanDuel. They're over 6K. So like, it's just a thing where Concher's starting and playing upper 20s minutes, and like, it's fine as like a last piece in. The reason I didn't mention him on DraftKings is because he's not 3,400.
No, he's not.
Like, he's 3,900. I'm gonna play. If Edwards was out, I'd rather play Anderson, or if I'd just much rather play
NAW. We're playing NAW anyway, so
and we don't need both NAW and Contra. That's like an incredibly low floor already. Like, just starting, if you start off with NAW and Contra, like, that's like a 20 fantasy point floor, because we've seen John Contra be bad from a fantasy point minutes. He doesn't score. He doesn't shoot. Right? He's a very good rebounder.
He's a poor man's Kyle Anderson, which is poor as it is.
He is a that's a good comparison. He's a poor man's Kyle Anderson. So I don't have much interest in Contra. If I lose there, so be it. I guess I'd understand it more on the FanDuel side of things because the lack of value. But on DraftKings, like,
again, I wouldn't even have talked about him if it wasn't for the fact that FanDuel had him where he was with the ownership there. I just had to mention it because we talk a lot about good chalk and bad chalk, and I get roster construction. Maybe you just need to plug him in, but for a second there, I thought FanDuel dropped back to drop the low score. That's when people were just plugging him in there. The murder cornet. You talked on the show this morning when he's been given the opportunity to be the primary backup big. He's kind of come through, and he'll have that opportunity here tonight with Kristaps Porzingis out.
Yeah, I think it's a 150 lineup play, have some exposure here. Yeah. He played 18 minutes as the primary center the last time we saw Kristaps Porzingis out. He was really good. We saw 18 minutes the time before. He was very solid. I wish he wasn't $4,700. That's the only thing I'd say. Like, this is like one of those things where I would love, like, it's the same scenario we were talking about Drummond earlier in the year, when Drummond had Drummond had one of those games last time out. I don't know if you saw it. He had 40 fantasy points, but it's like, yeah, I'd love to play these guys if they were low fours, not higher fours, take a shot on large field tournaments. So I don't think I'm going to be getting much exposure because he's 4,700, but he is going to operate as the primary backup, and he can block a lot of shots. And when he blocks a lot of shots, there's obviously a ceiling there.
Sure. Anybody else?
No.
All righty, let's build a lineup here, James. What's the first plug for you today?
Nickeil Alexander-Walker is where we're gonna start, because
need the value. Makes sense.
Yeah, we just need the value.
What's pick number 2? Who's the spend?
Luka? I don't necessarily think you have to. If you want to play Embiid, we can. I really like the mid tier today. Like, I want to play Jaren Jackson today, and obviously we'll see, because like Jaren Jackson might end up turning to Karl Anthony Towns, or by the time
play them both.
Yeah, you could end up playing them both, but I think Jaren Jackson makes a lot of sense. And then like one of the Bulls, either Kobe White or DeMar DeRozan, would be another. Like, if we're just gonna stick with this mid tier build.
Do you like Triple J as your center or power forward?
I mean, I'm good if we wanted to play like Wendell Carter or Tillman as our center.
64-50 point guard forward util. Was there any 8K range players you liked tonight? Did you
Scotty? Yeah, Scotty would probably be the 8K guy of preference.
Okay. Scotty Barnes in at forward here. 58-66 point guard, guarding util.
We could also play
Barnes could also
Scotty
be a
at
point guard too.
You could also play Scotty at point guard.
Let's go Scotty at point guard. Let's do that.
I think that makes sense.
Scotty Barnes at point guard, guard forward util 58-86. Do you want to go Alec Burks here? Do you think tournament play there?
Sure.
Or would you rather like Jaden Ivey?
No, we could play Alec Burks.
Alec Burks, okay. Oh, we did Burks already. All right, $6,100 forward util. 61 in this range.
Nas Reed, 49 at forward, and then we can, or Pat Will at 46, one of the two.
I like Nas there. And then $7,300 for util gives us Kobe White. I'm just plugging both.
Yeah.
Want to play one or the other, man? Can fit them both in there. That's $100 left over for an example lineup. Fair and balanced build for y'all tonight. Scotty Barnes, NEW, DeMar DeRozan, Jaren Jackson, Wendell Carter, Alec Burks, Nas Reed, and Kobe White. Our guy Juan in here wants to know, do we do any best ball underdog? We do. We do best ball underdog for sure. We talk about that in our Discord. We do some videos for as well occasionally doing best ball underdog battle royal drafts. Our guy Sean Mitchell has been on a little bit of a vacation, but he'll be back tomorrow. He's been the king of the best ball battle royal drafts. So you can certainly find some content over in our Discord there for sure. Primate saying Horford a lock. Yeah, we like Horford tonight. $6,100 for sure. Gonna get those minutes without Kristaps Porzingis. We just know that the actual point ceiling for him is pretty low. He can get some rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals for you in your lineups there. Get in the Discord, everybody. Again, if you haven't already liked and subscribed to the channel, don't wait. Hit that button now so you never miss a live show. And of course, if you want to become a member of the Fantasy Alarm family, you can scan that QR code there on the screen. Go to fantasyalarm.com/win. Right now, our annual subscription package is 40% off the month-to-month cost. And if you're a fantasy baseball player, we have some expectations that our fantasy baseball draft guide will be released in the coming days. So you get that now. It comes free with your All-Pro subscription. So get ready for the fantasy baseball season with us. Your All-Pro subscription gets you access to everything behind the paywall on site and our premium Discord. So it's not just the NBA DFS content, but NHL, MMA, PGA, NASCAR starting back up, MLB when the NFL season comes back around, that as well. So become a member of the Fantasy Alarm family today. Hang out with James and I in the Discord. Talk some NBA with us all there. Any final words here, James, before we get into the roster walk tonight?
I would say just stay hip to the news. We still got a lot to go. We'll know the Cleveland news ahead of time. We probably don't know the Minnesota news before lock, so you'll have to stay hip to the news after 7 o'clock. And if you need anything from us, we'll be in the Discord past lock talking about what's going on, who's in, who's out, who to pivot to, who are the good fantasy point per minute producers, and all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. All right, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Don't miss